Today's quest is to swim to an amazing medieval castle nestled in the Cairngorm National Park in a loch that we haven't explored before, called Loch An Eilein. The visibility in the water today is pretty good, so we should have a fair chance of seeing anything that's hiding underwater. We've got Grant joining us for the adventure today. He's a fellow waterman and longtime friend. Sadly, Erin couldn't make it because she forgot her wetsuit. The wind's blowing an absolute hoolie today, so it's actually quite a hard crossing to the castle, with the waves and the wind creating a bit of a current trying to blow us away. Here we are approaching the eastern wall of the castle. You can see that little door ahead of us, and that's where we're going to be entering the island. So just in front of us here is a beautiful medieval vaulted cellar in great condition. Some of the walls here are around 5 foot thick.
How was the swim, Grant?
Oh, absolutely delightful.
Hellish.
Like many islands in Scottish lochs, it's thought that it may have had an artificial origin, being built up by rocks and debris to form an early dwelling known as a crannog. It's thought that the earliest part of the castle may have been built by the bishops of Moray in the 13th century, but then was probably rebuilt and added to by the famous character called Alexander Stewart, the Wolf of Badenoch. Alexander Stewart was the fourth bastard son of King Robert II of Scotland. In 1371, Alexander was made Lord of Badenoch and was given lots of estates and castles in this area. Whatever structure existed prior to Alexander, he got his medieval masons to add to it, creating the wonderful 14th century structure we see before us. Grant and I are amazed when we find this perfectly preserved medieval staircase. This staircase would have led up to the tower, which would have been the highest point on the castle. We can't believe how small and tight and narrow the staircase is.
Do you think we could make the sketchy crossing?
We make a slightly precarious crossing to the upper part of the medieval ramparts. From up here you get an amazing commanding view of the loch, and you get a sense of what it would have been like to be a medieval soldier keeping watch on the castle walls. The brutally high winds and our neoprene socks probably aren't the best tools to explore the medieval castle walls today, so we're going to go down to the next floor and see what we can see.
Whoa! Whoa! Who are these stairs made for?
This looks like it would have been one of the larger rooms in the main tower. It's amazing to look through this window frame here and imagine all the historical figures looking out at the shore of the loch. And we're certain that a few musket balls had probably been shot and arrows loosed from this window over the years. When Alexander was granted lordship over these lands, he was expected to govern with royal authority, but in reality ended up running things like protection rackets and apparently fathered over 40 illegitimate children. In the summer of 1382, Alexander greatly increased his land holdings by marrying Euphemia, Countess of Ross. The problem was, Euphemia did not bear Alexander any legitimate children, so he sought the help of the local bishop to try and annul the marriage. The bishop sided with Euphemia, which enraged Alex, who then expelled Euphemia to make way for his mistress of the moment, Mariotta Athen. This wasn't such a great move because the bishop then excommunicated Alexander from the church. Before I tell you the last part of Alexander's story, Grant and I were absolutely astonished to come across these huge chunks of castle wall, which had obviously fallen from the ramparts and were laying here underwater, perfectly preserved. I mean, the lime mortar which they used must be absolutely first class to have stayed this long in the water. Look, you can even see the cornerstones of this part of the wall here. So Alexander had failed to get his annulment, he'd been excommunicated, and he had a perfectly rational response to all of this, which was to gather a troop of wild, wicked Highland men and set about sacking the town of Forres before moving east, then sacking Pluscarden Abbey, and then finally going on to Elgin, where he burned pretty much half the town, destroyed the cathedral, and made off with all the relics and gold and so on. You can definitely see why his name, the Wolf of Badenoch, might be quite fitting.